5 years ago in 2008, I began a new legacy with this woman right here, Eureka. I had many legacies going at that point, and I didn't know that this would become the one I loved the most and lasted the longest. Eureka was a disgraced scientist who had been tossed out of the community after her former partner stole all their research and published it as her own. When Eureka protested that she had done this research too, she was kicked out of the science community and forced to be in exile in the woods. She continued her research there, however. After all, she's got the heart of a scientist, curiosity about the natural world, so this was actually the perfect setting for her to clear her mind, not have to compete, and just become one with nature. To that end, she really ended up becoming one with nature when the plant she was studying suddenly had a really odd side effect. She turned into a plant sim, which made her studying so much easier to do. No more pesky wasps to worry about. Shortly after she became a plant sim, she met some members of the local gardening club, including Evander. Evander was fascinated with her condition, and luckily he was able to share some of her passion for science. They spent many late nights fishing together at her pond behind the house. She also became an interesting participant in quite a few alien abductions. This was back before free time, so all these alien abductions that happened again and again were simply part of Eureka's story. They occurred without me interfering, and they were certainly an interesting experience for a knowledge sim. Out in the wilderness, and with her plant sim condition, it seemed she was a popular target for aliens. However, this let her establish a relationship with intergalactic members early on in her life. That relationship continued even as she began to settle into her home in the wilderness. She was abducted again and again, and eventually learned not to fear it, as much as find it interesting to have a chance to participate in inspirational conversations. She wasn't getting that on her planet after all. The local science club was absolutely dreary, and she constantly fought with Raphael Hex, the science club leader. They just didn't get along and see eye to eye on sharing science with the whole community. Thankfully, after those fights, Evander was there to comfort her. Their relationship progressed extremely quickly. She didn't notice just how much he cared for her until he kissed her right on the mouth one night. Things progressed quickly. They decided to get to know each other a little bit better, and shortly after, they married. Of course, what happens in any legacy after you find a 3-bolter, and she was lucky enough to be 3 bolts with Evander, is that she soon discovered that even with her plant sim condition, she was expecting. This was a pretty exciting thing for Evander, who also wished to see a big family grow up around him. And if he had really thought about those words, he would have taken it back, because when it came time for Eureka to give birth, she managed just fine, even though her plant sim condition made it quite the interesting experience for her, one that she would be sure to record and publish in a scientific journal as soon as she could, because she ended up not with 1, not with 2, but with 3 babies. The Eureka triplets were born. Thankfully, it was very easy for Eureka to take care of her young children, even in her plant sim condition, since all she had to do was shake her head and toss a few life-giving spores around. In fact, their babyhood was so easy that in no time, the Eureka children were all toddlers. They were all intelligent, bright, and well-tended. Their mother sprayed them with spores whenever they had any particular needs, and they spent much of their day learning and growing. They grew pretty quickly. Soon they were children, all lined up in a row, 1, 2, 3. Their names were Newton for the boy, Rosalind for the eldest girl, and Evelyn for the youngest girl. Here, Newton and Evelyn are playing in the front, while Rosalind watches in the background. They often explored the forest around their house unsupervised for hours, completely content with the natural world, just like their mother. They also managed to find quite a few surprises of their own, though the genie lamp was something their mother and father swore was just a figment of their children's imagination. They spent long evenings talking with one another in their room, and bonded very close, especially for the triplets. Especially for being triplets, that is. Meanwhile, Eureka and Evander continued to have discussions about what the future would be like. Eureka's constant fights with Raphael Hex about making science available to everyone instead of putting up paywalls and making it difficult for people to find interest in such a drab, dreary community became a constant target of fighting in her mind. They often went on vacations to try to relax and also to see more about the world. When they went on a vacation to Three Lakes, they certainly did have some time to relax. But unfortunately, one night, while Newton was looking at the stars, his parents were currently engaged in a hammock woohoo, they turned around and saw that their son, their only son, had been hit by a satellite, my only death by satellite that had ever happened in the game. And how could it happen to my favorite little boy? Thankfully, Eureka was able to rescue her son from the jaws of death, or in this case, I guess, just his thigh, and his cell phone. After that, Newton never really looked at the stars the same again, but he still tried to pursue as much an interest in science as both his parents had. The triplets quickly grew up into teenagers, and they spent quite a lot of time helping their parents out with the various tasks and projects that Eureka put her mind to. But before long, it was time for them to head off to college and engage their minds in the even broader world. They packed up and headed out. Their parents were happy to see them go. It's important to continue to educate your mind, after all. Of course, at college, Newton and Rosalind managed to find themselves educated in some much-needed social skills as well. Newton, in particular, was quite attractive to many of the women who came to the parties and the dances that they threw. Evelyn was the odd one out. While Newton and Rosalind were out playing, she found herself all alone, trying to explore the natural world around her, and often finding herself attacked by bees. However, things got very interesting when she invited a couple members from her art class over one night. Valerie managed to trip right over her own shoes and fall into Newton's arms. It escalated quickly from there. Before they had even exchanged last names, they were already figuring out how many children they should have and what their names would be. It was really love at first sight, and there was almost nothing I could do to prevent it. Newton was so happy with Valerie, it just seemed absolutely fitting. Meanwhile, Evelyn was very unhappy. She took the move away from home into university the hardest out of all the triplets. She just didn't seem to settle in. She was constantly crying and often seemed angry at absolutely nothing. Unfortunately, her attempts to find love and find friendship just kept falling on their faces. Meanwhile, back at home, Evander was doing quite well, watching the cats and tending to the various things around the house. He and Eureka had risen very high in their respective fields. Eureka was back to being a very respected natural scientist. Of course, that probably came with time. As she aged, she realized she had devoted her whole life to rewriting what people understood about the natural world. And she had done her job well. She was now accepted in the science community as one of its invaluable treasures. Of course, that was in large part thanks to having such a supportive husband who always watched out for her. Evander and Eureka went on their golden honeymoon and found quite a few interesting things at the Tweaky Islands. Evander became a participant in the constant abductions that seemed to plague Eureka's life. It was a good thing he was an elder at this time. Eureka joined him almost every night that they looked at the telescope. Free time, this is all before free time, and without any hacks, they seemed to get abducted again and again. However, this again gave them important conversations with the aliens. Meanwhile, I'm missing a million pictures in between, but everyone graduated, and Valerie and Newton quickly married. They were totally meant for each other, and soon they had their first son, Leon, born into the family. Valerie was a very family-oriented sim, and loved how handsome her husband was, so she wasted no time in hurrying around and convincing Newton that they should add to their brood, and soon they had two twins, Galen and Alex. Their family was certainly growing and doing quite well. Now the dinner table was surrounded by a bunch of red-headed little boys, all with their own unique personalities. Leon, the eldest, was quite serious, and he actually seemed to have a little bit of a mean streak hidden inside of him. Alex, was the sweetest. He loved animals, and he especially had a passion for cooking. He was often sneaking into the living room at night in order to watch the cooking shows. He's the youngest of the brood, born just a few minutes after his brother. Alex got along well with everyone on the surface, but he was often away from everyone and plotting. The mean streak he had when he was younger never really left him, but he didn't want anyone to see it as he got older and realized just how damaging it could be. Meanwhile, Galen The middle child was the quietest and tended to play with sports or go outside to kick the soccer ball by himself for quite a while. Leon grew up into a great teenager, but he had a devious streak that he hid from the rest of his family quite well. Meanwhile, Rosalind moved back in with her parents and married her college sweetheart, Bredith. She really had her arm twisted into marrying Bredith. As a romance sim, she didn't want to settle down, but she felt bad for almost cheating on Bredith in college and asked him to marry her as a way of apologizing. She didn't really want to start a family, so thinking they were being helpful, her parents had Bredith and Rosalind abducted, and they had Bredith implanted with the fetuses from the two. So Bredith carried the pregnancy, and soon their twins were born, Lena and Kenneth. Lena and Kenneth were both bright, intelligent children who really had active, engaged imaginations. They really did entertain their grandparents and their parents, though Rosalind's eyes were often drawn elsewhere. She had a fling or two behind Bredith's back, just unable to contain her boredom with sticking to one guy. However, the one guy that she did fling with, another business partner, ended up having quite the surprise when he dropped by Rosalind's house one day. She was already pregnant, something she had definitely not wanted to happen, but something that she went with after it had occurred. Bredith was just so happy to see her pregnant after all. So imagine her surprise when one of the potential fathers showed up at her door, not even knowing that she was married or that she had children, and could have wrecked everything. Unfortunately, she had a weak spot for him, and besides, it was so thrilling to actually escape this idea of being a house mom. It just never fit her very well. Yes, she loved her children, and as her pregnancy advanced, she actually started to look forward to seeing the new baby. I mean, when the baby was born, the whole family was so happy. Her kids loved having a sibling, and honestly, the process hadn't been as grueling or as damaging to her body as she thought. Bredith accepted the child, though Rosalind didn't really know if it was his or not. Thankfully, plenty of her characteristics, as the child was named Lena, seemed to fit with her father, or at least who Rosalind hoped was her father. Though honestly, Lena took more after her mother than anything else. Rosalind doted on Lena a little more than she did the twins. Probably because she had had her herself, and probably because she was so worried about her possible origins being found out. The twins grew up into teenagers. They continued to share a room, and they shared all their secrets, except for a really big one that Kenneth carried around with him all the time. Meanwhile, over in Japan, Evelyn was settling down into quite the exciting life. She became a superstar, starring in several films, and interacting with the international scene on quite the party-going level. That time in college, being cut away from everyone, really affected her. She became a superstar, even though her shy personality would have normally never allowed her to do so. She also met someone quite interesting, Ryo, a politician in the Japanese cabinet. He was quite famous, and she fell for him hard. Ryo, however, just looked at her as a celebrity fling, so you can imagine his surprise when Evelyn said that she was pregnant, and suddenly he found himself at a shotgun wedding back in Evelyn's hometown of Ledesia. He put on a good performance, being able to entertain all of her family and keep his biggest secret hidden. The marriage went off without a hitch, Evelyn never telling anyone that she was pregnant during the whole ordeal, and the pregnancy advanced. Evelyn couldn't have been happier. Finally, she was having her dream. She had a true love, she had a budding family, but what she didn't know was that her husband, while also a famous politician, was a member of the underground Japanese Yakuza, or the mob. She constantly got phone calls from him, apologizing that he would be late that night. He had work in the office. Little did she know that that work in the office really had to do with his underground criminal activities. Now, Ryo actually began to develop some feelings for Evelyn, though they weren't very strong. He was more committed to carrying on his family line of criminal business than he was to carrying on a family with her. She had her babies, it was a difficult pregnancy, and 2 twins were born. They had an au pair to look after them, since both their parents were extremely busy. One of the babies, a boy, the one that Ryo was actually very excited about, was Kale. Kale was extremely cute, adorable, intelligent, and he took a little bit after his sister, Yuri. And this is where the Eureka family is right now. So we're going to check in on them in just a bit. So what did you guys think? That was 5 years of Legacy playing condensed into just 15 minutes. And I promise you it wasn't easy. I left out a lot of stories, a lot of pictures, obviously. And I'm going to put a link to their stories on a live journal that I use for story storage into this video description. So if you guys want to get the real in-depth view of what the Eureka family was like, as well as, please keep this in mind, 5-year-old writing. So this was way back before Legacy stories actually really got going. This was back when people were still just vaguely experimenting with implementing stories into their Legacy instead of just like, and they got a promotion, and they had a baby, and they kissed. LOL, look at this picture. So it's not that, it's story based, but it's definitely fly by the seat of your pants and not my best work, but I'm proud of it because I love them. I love the Eurekas. I've built a whole community about them, and now I'm sharing them with you guys. We are here at the Eureka Estates. This is the central home belonging to Erica Eureka, the founder of the Legacy, and also Rosalind Eureka, who, out of the triplets, was chosen to be heiress, even though at the time I liked her siblings better. Isn't that weird? But I just felt like she would be the one to end up at home. And that's mostly because her brother Newton, who lives in this house over here, is very independent. He's got his stuff together, and he and his wife are both big family people. They like being close to family, but they also like running their own family. Also, you may notice there's been an addition over here. We now have Evelyn Eureka moved back from Japan and has moved into Ledesia to be close to her family. So we've got all the triplets lined up in a row, and it just feels great to have everybody back home. However, she's got some drama going on. This is going to give you the in-depth glance at the Eurekas right now, with the storylines that are going on and what stories might affect Ledesia as a whole. If you're not interested in them, don't worry. They aren't like make it or break it for understanding Ledesia. They're just a bit of a backbone to the city, and they're one of my favorite families, so that's why I'm sharing them. Alright, down here in the kitchen garden, which is of course in a warehouse, is the amazing, the totally awesome, the fantastically geniusly smart, redefine the natural world, Erica Eureka. She is still a plant sim. I really debated about changing her back, but it just fits her so perfectly. I believe I'm going to change how plant sims are summoned in my game. It might be something that's passed down if you're not a plant, like born a plant baby and then grow up into a plant sim. It might be something that is given by old plant sims who have since gone on to turn into trees, which is what happens in my head when plant sims die, is that they turn into trees. I would like to note that I have seen this done in Strange Tomatoes version in her story, and it was absolutely beautiful. In her story, they all turn into willow trees. I was thinking, and I've had this idea for a long time too, so I'm like not trying to make claimsies on it or anything, but I just want to make sure everyone understands I'm not just stealing someone else's idea. It just seems so natural. Plant sim dies, plant sim turns into a tree. So technically they're not really dead. But yes, anyway, Erica is planting eggplants, because what better food is there for her genius grandchildren than eggplant juice? They have dirty dishes. Need to take care of that. Now, you guys may notice that the house is kind of sparse. There's not a lot here. In all of my families, I don't use motherload, especially not my legacy families. I don't really even use ka-ching except in emergencies when I can justify it, because I like to make them work for what they have, and you wouldn't believe how much they were scrounging until yesterday when Erica got back from her ecological guru job with its $10,000 pay, because they were really having some issues. Now she's busy planting some seeds for the eggplants. Erica's totally awesome. Unfortunately, both she and her husband Evander are getting very close to passing on. This is Evander. He's at work. We'll take a closer glance at him when he gets back. The other Sims who are currently home include Kenneth, who has been tagged as heir. Also, for some unknown reason, oh, come on, there we go. For some unknown reason, my meshes are having issues, so the only untuckable pant mesh that works is the sexy feet, which means that he walks around without shoes all day. I'm rolling with it right now. I'm calling it a quirk. He doesn't like shoes. Kenneth is being awesome. He's currently slaving away on his homework, trying to get it out of the way so that he can move on to other things for the day. Kenneth is kind of like, not that his grandparents have favorites, but he's very smart and he's got a good personality and he's kind. So they have actually gotten him a job as a galactic interpreter. It's really hush-hush because any involvement with the aliens is still very, you know, kept under covers. And not even many members of his family really know the details of what he does, just that he's working for Grandma and Grandpa. And they just roll their eyes, because who knows what that could be. He could be anything working for two geniuses running a science community. So he's pen pals, right now it's just pen pals, not video chat, with some aliens around his age, not chronological age, because aliens probably age differently than Sims/humans. So he's currently pen pals with some aliens, and that's what he does for his job. Pretty cool. And then out here we have Lena, and I paused the game because Lena came out here to sunbathe because she's like, I just want to relax and kind of unwind. She's got some zits going on. Very distressing for a teenage girl who wants to make tons of friends and go on lots of dates. But so she's slathering on the sunscreen, and then this dude starts walking past. Oh, I thought he was a teenager. Well, I'll still have her greet him. I'm not having her flirt with him, but she could always use more friends. But Lena's really cool. She's a sweetheart, very friendly, very nice. She loves her brother. They're really two peas in a pod. And they've grown up real well together. And Elisa is also home. What you doing up here with your dirty diaper, baby girl? She only has one nice point, so she's actually a bit of a terror, but I tell you what, this kid just has the cutest face. Alright. She's stuck up there till someone goes to get her. But yeah, everyone else is currently at work, so we're gonna bring the main family back home. As far as plots that are going on, well, Ralph, you jerk. And he walks off even though she's gonna interrupt her awesome sunbathing. I guess sunbathing doesn't cancel well. Noted. Let's see, any plots currently going on? Well, Eureka's running Ledesia, that's kind of a biggie. And go ahead and sunbathe again, honey. Kenneth is working on establishing some pen pal chit-chat with some aliens that his grandparents have put him in contact with. Really a hush-hush operation, kept really tight even within the family. Not like they keep secrets from each other, but it's just like on a need-to-know basis, you know? Aw, Eureka needs some love. I really love Plant Sim needs, cause come on. Aw, and she was singing. Lena was singing to herself. I think that Plant Sim needs are totally awesome. Where are you going, baby girl? Oh, she's gonna take a nap. Okay, we'll just have Eureka clean up here. Oh, someone just got home. And there's Bredeth. Hey, Bredeth. Don't cheer. He's trying to go over to the mailbox to cheer. I've just started, like, it just hit me the other day. I was like, I don't like the mailbox out front. I should move it. And I mean, I've moved them in the past, but now that I remembered to move it, I've moved them on like all the houses I've gone to. And I also hid the trash cans under a recycling bin because it just fits. And I put a walk-through block on, like I put it on top of a walk-through block, which means it doesn't block anything when my Sims go to use the trash can. And I love it. Because it just is totally a Ledesia thing. Also, you may notice something. The abundance of plants. Yes, I decorated the outside with plants before I really invested on more decorating on the inside. And that's because I just couldn't stand looking at this bare openness in the front. It just wasn't right for this family. But yes, moving on. Bredith is really cool. Bredith is a... Is he? He is... I think... Bredith. Bredith is family popularity, that's right. And there are some plots going on with him. If you guys were paying attention, Rosalind isn't exactly the most loyal of Sims. She's a romance Sim who really feels like she just kind of bumbled into this marriage without meaning to. And so she started cheating on her husband and ended up getting pregnant like at the same time she was cheating on him. So for a while there, neither she nor I, because we were using some mods at that time, knew who the father was. And thankfully it turned out that Bredith was indeed the father. So that was a little bit interesting. I really didn't know how that was going to turn out. And we'll send him over to do some chess. Grandma can go join him so she can get sunlight and some attention. But Bredith, he wants to learn couples counseling, and that just seemed really fitting for where he and his wife currently are. They were triple bowlers in their old neighborhood, and now they have dropped to 1 bolt. So I'm interpreting that as they just don't get along anymore. Their marriage is really on the rocks. They both know it, but they hold things together for their kids and for the community that they've ended up being committed to building with the rest of their family. So poor Bredith, he just really wants to have a happy family, and the poor Rosalind just got in over her head and with people's emotions, and it just never ends well that way. Oh, come here, Eureka. Is Lena awake again? Leave Lena alone, she's taking a nap. She even got herself into that crib, which is amazing. Don't pester the baby. Go outside and play chess with your grandson. Oh, did I hear another car? Awesome! Grandpa's home. Oh, and Rosalind. Are you wearing a top? I was about to say she better be wearing a top. Alright, Rosalind's home. Nice to see. Yeah, I knew they wouldn't take long to get some money once they got going. Rosalind, why don't you play with your daughter? Rosalind's very, like, formal and huffy all the time, but she needs to relax. Now, Rosalind's backstory, because all my Sims, when I recreated them for this neighborhood, well, they're recreations. They're not the originals. So they lost their lifetime wants. They lost their jobs. I restored them to close to what their old jobs were. In Evander and Erika's case, I did make them the head of the SCIA for Evander and an ecological guru for Eureka, because they're elders and I wasn't going to make them claw their way back up the track. But I made Rosalind, who used to be at the top of the business career, start over as a president, and I made Bredith, who used to be very close to the top of the teaching career, go to high school teacher. And I might lock him there, because in my head, actually in game, he is the teacher for the students in Ledesia, for the genius students. Now, Rosalind's backstory to explain the loss of her job and the loss of her skills, which used to be maxed out, is that she was in a car accident, and it was very upsetting for her. Adriana Porter. That's a townie that sells by now then. Maybe I'll have her go greet.